In order to get access to the Citrix Presentation Server applications through a browser interface, possibly from outside the network, I need to configure a web interface server. That's typically an IIS Microsoft machine separate from the other Citrix servers, although in a demo or a pilot implementation it can very well be part of one of the Citrix servers, whether those are PS3 or 4 or even PS4.5. The first step, technically, is to make sure that I've got the servers, whether PS3 or PS4, running the same XML port so that I can use them interchangeably. The next thing to do is go over to the IIS box and install some web interface software, which comes free on the component CD from Citrix. Web Interface 4.2 is the latest version here. Web Interface 4.2 is the only one, the first version, that will integrate with Advanced Access Control. The software that comes with the PS4 servers is actually a Web Interface 4.0, and there are two quotes from Citrix. One is that you cannot upgrade from Web Interface 4.0 to 4.2. The other quote from Citrix is that you can update from 4.0 to 4.2, but it will not take the changes, nor take any of your settings. So basically you can't update. Rather than use the 4.0 software that came with the component CD, the Web Interface 4.2 software can be downloaded, webinterfaceretail.exe. You'd also need an Access Suite console patch to connect to the extra settings that are available in the Web Interface 4.2. So I'm going to install Web Interface 4 and 4.2 software, two different web servers, to show you the difference. The one thing I will have to do then is use the Access Suite console and configure a site. I'll go in and create a site. When I create a site, I'll create it in a local configuration file, basically a file called Web Interface Conf on the hard drive of the web server. And the three main things I need to tell the site are the Citrix farm that you're supposed to get applications from, at least one server in that farm as the designated XML server, and I need the XML port that those servers are listening over. Once I've created a site, the idea is that the client machines will pull up whatever browser they have. They will also have some Citrix software installed on them ahead of time, and if not ahead of time, I can easily roll out a web client. I intend for the browsers to hit the URL of the web interface server. That'll be a straight HTTP port 80 connection. The web interface will cache those credentials for 20 minutes and pass those credentials to the designated XML server. They'll come back with a web page listing all the icons the user has access to and put the web page on the user's PC. The next thing the user will do is they will click on an icon, and that click will be forwarded directly to the web interface. The web interface will now create a dynamic ICA file. That ICA file will be given to the client, and that will get the client their application. This ICA file is going to be created dynamically by the web interface software. It will be parsing a file that we get to manage called the default.ica. This is where the administrator is allowed to add things like 128-bit encryption, compression, things like that. The web interface software will parse the default ICA and make a dynamic, one-time-only application ICA file. This ICA file will have the application settings. It'll have the IP address of the least busy server in the back of the network. And theoretically, it would also have the credentials that the user fed to the web interface. Technically, though, it wouldn't be safe to be sending credentials over the wire, so we have a Citrix Secure Ticket Authority DLL sitting in the web interface, and its job is to make a one-time-only ticket, overwrite those credentials with the one-time-only ticket, feed this ICA file out to the client, and when the client feeds the ICA file back to a server, servers don't listen to tickets, they're looking for credentials. The server will have to ask the Secure Ticket Authority, did you just make this ticket, and have you not seen it in the past 200 seconds? And if it says yes, the user is authenticated. So that ICA file is going back over the wire over the HTTP port 80 connection to the ICA client. Simple File Association says this ICA file is for the client software, and that client software makes a direct ICA connection via 1494 or CGP 2598 these days to the Citrix server whose IP address it was told to make a connection to. So in order to set this up, what I need to do is pull up the Access Suite console and this presentation server that actually happens to have the web interface software installed as well. This is my web interface node in the Access Suite console. I've already got a PN agent site set, but I don't have a URL I can go to for web interface. So now I'm going to create a site, and this will be a MetaFrame presentation server or a web interface 4.0 site. Hit next on this. By default, the site will be http pressservb, the server I'm on, /citrix/metaframe. If I don't need my users to type all this every time, I can simply set this as the default page for this particular IIS box. Then they can just type http pressservb. I definitely want to be storing this in a local configuration file. That would be a file called webinterfaceconf by default on the hard drive of this web interface machine. I can then use the Access Suite console to export that configuration to a thumb drive or other backup media, and also to import a backed up configuration file. The idea of using a central configuration file would be that I would be putting this in the data store of one of my Citrix servers. To do that, I'd have to have significant access through DMZ, and I have to have the proper credentials. So I'm going to keep it simple and keep the configuration file locally on the hard drive. The main information I have to tell my site is the farm, and this is classroom farm. Talk to the classroom farm. The pressservb is the one I'm going to type in now, and I have to type in the XML port. That would be port 8080. And so I have a site being created for me. And as soon as the site is created, there are plenty of other settings I can do. I can go make customizations as far as the logo and the colors, and also important ICA traffic information can be configured in here. But just to show you right away without doing anything else, I should now have a website. And this is my site, pressservb/citrix/metaframe. To check that site, let me pull up Internet Explorer. And I should be able to type http://my-server. This is the server where I installed the web interface and configured the site. I'm going to pressservb. That gets redirected to pressservb/citrix/metaframe, and I'm not going to press the button. I'm going to wait till this website wakes up its first time, takes some configuring, takes some initializing. What I should see here in a few moments is a site looking for my credentials. My credentials, my password, the domain by default. I'll feed that in, and I should see my applications enumerated. And if that happens, we've got a site that's successful at contacting a Citrix network. And this is just going to take another moment. Maybe I will give it that click. And so here's a default web interface site. I'm going to feed it some credentials. And this user, education domain. So the web interface should now be passing my credentials to the designated XML server. The XML server is listening over port 8080. It's asking on behalf of the entire farm what these credentials get, and it turns out this is what the credentials get. These are my applications, and there's that.